Hi, and welcome to another episode of Empower Dyslexia podcast and show. I'm Rachel Chambers,
And I'm Stephen Yearout.
and we're here to make you a better informed partner in education. On this podcast, we discuss dyslexia intervention, and dyslexia and related disorders, research, and we also do interviews with experts in the field. Today on our show, we have welcomed a guest back. Her name is Daphne Corder. She is a social worker, and she's also a parent advocate specializing in dyslexia. So welcome to the show today, Daphne.
Thank you.
So we have a couple of questions for you regarding being an advocate, right?
Yes, we have a little segment called Ask the Advocate.
Yes. And so we're going to ask you some questions that parents have asked us to see if we can get some answers for them.
Sure.
So the first question is, how do I know that the school is doing it right? Like when their child is in a dyslexia intervention, or they're not even identified yet, and they're telling them maybe no.
Well, let's stay with how do we know that the school is doing the intervention right?
We'll start
with
there.
Okay. Well, first of all, in our earlier podcasts, I just want to encourage parents. I go through in greater detail about knowing whether or not their child is getting the dyslexia intervention done properly. Fidelity is just another word for as prescribed. Are they doing it right? And so in that last episode 13, I go into that. But I will say in general, go with your guts. Usually if you're having to even ask that question, you probably already know the answer. You're asking it because something doesn't seem right. You're being told that that they're fine, or they're just a little bit behind, they'll catch up. And so you really want to make sure that you listen to your gut and you make sure and get a very good evaluation done either by the school. If they haven't already done it, make sure that you ask for a full evaluation. And if you have received that report and it doesn't seem to fit what you see is going on, absolutely ask for an independent evaluation. They're called IEEs, and they're paid for by the district. That's one of your rights, is to get an outside evaluation from the person that you, as long as they meet the requirements, a person that of your choosing.
So that you were talking about, is my child receiving this? Are they doing that? And you were talking about fidelity, and a lot of times we hear, one of the other things, well, they'll just grow out of it, and that type of thing. The next question is, can my child get by with just tutoring? And it's that RTI, response to intervention mentality, or whatever.
Or just hiring a tutor to help them with their homework even. What do you say about that?
I would say absolutely not. It might help them with their homework, but to really remediate dyslexia, it requires a certain type of program, and it requires a certain training by the person giving that. Most of the cults that I've met, many of them were teachers that went into it either because their own child was dyslexic and they felt like, wow, we were never taught how to work with children like this. And so they wanted more, and they wanted to get more information and training. And that's something that we need to start looking at, having that discussion. Why aren't our teachers keeping up with the science of reading? Why isn't the way that we're teaching dyslexics to read, why that should be used on all children? There's some basic things that can be done differently in the way that we teach children to read. So I would say that if you're getting a tutor to help with homework, that's fine, but to actually remediate dyslexia, you're going to need to have specific dyslexia interventions, and you're going to need to be doing it regularly. Just like if you took an aspirin for a headache, if it was if you had a headache due to a tumor, well, the Tylenol might help a little bit, but there's still an initial issue that needs to be resolved.
Right.
Great analogy. Right. Yeah. So here's another question that we've come across.
The $64 million question.
Why, especially in Texas? Well, I hope we're getting better. I hope we're getting better and moving in the right direction. I'm going to stay hopeful. Right.
The districts that I work with are definitely getting better.
Yes. You have had really good success. Definitely. I think there's a lot of work that probably still needs to be done in some other districts. But here's the question. Why is it hard to work with my school? Why are we coming up with roadblock after roadblock and excuse after excuse? What do you think about that?
Well, one thing is that I think the biggest issue is funding. The law is very, very strong in its language and very descriptive about children with special needs and the rights that parents have and the rights that those children have to get a free and appropriate education. However, the funding to back that up is so small, and it's just not enough. And a lot of our funding formulas are done based on old information, and it just hasn't kept up with the research, with the time of the increase in what it costs in education. And so I would say that's usually the biggest issue. The other thing that happens is that I think some teachers and administration don't understand dyslexia, and they don't understand how they need to be working harder and helping children, that they say, well, they're fine. They're
Right.
bright kids and their grades are good. So why should we help them? They're not like other children. It's a disability that's a little bit harder to understand. They may not understand that they're working 3 hours in order to, they're exhausted because they have to work twice as hard than everybody else. And they're so aware of that difference. And so that's just an education that we have to work on.
A lot of times you have to not re-educate. You have to educate the people that you're working with a lot of times, because like Daphne is saying, these administrators and these teachers know only what they've been told in the continuing education. So a lot of times you have to, as a parent, have to go out and do your own research, figure out exactly what needs to be happening, and take that information and keep presenting it every time that you talk to them. So at some point it's going to sink in. Right. So a lot of times for that piece of it, and this is my suggestion, is to make sure that you educate yourself. So if you need to, you can educate whoever you're speaking to about whatever needs your child needs. So,
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Okay. So leads us to our next question.
When is it time for a parent to go out and seek an advocate?
And what can you do for them, right? What does an advocate do for the student and for the family?
So what an advocate does, what an advocate is a person that has special knowledge about special education law and services. So they are people, a lot of times they come from different backgrounds. Sometimes it's a mother that has been through the process so many times that they've become familiar, they've learned about it, they've become more educated, and so they can walk other parents through it. Sometimes they're teachers that saw how difficult it was for families, and they didn't like that they were being told to not say anything to a parent. Don't tell them concerns, because that will make us liable. Don't tell a parent this or that. And so they get upset and they say, wait a minute, I want to help these families out. And sometimes, like in my case, I kind of had a little bit of both, because I was a clinical social worker and worked many years with children in foster care, worked with children in the ECI program, children with disabilities and delays, and then ended up years later, when I had children, I ended up having a child with dyslexia. And so then I thought, well, of course, I'm going to know how to deal with this. It's going to be a lot easier for me. And it really wasn't.
I
so
agree. I was the same way.
Extra.
I was the exact same way. I'm like, oh, well, I'm a nurse practitioner. I'll know how to deal with this. Oh, no. And I've had friends who are lawyers. They're like, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm clueless. I have to go back and, read everything. Like, what was that?
Yeah.
It's just a specialized knowledge, right?
Yes. And I did have to, there's not a licensed program. You're not required to have any license. I don't think there's any place in the United States. I know in Texas, you don't have to there's not a licensing board for parent advocates, but there are well-known programs that do training. I specifically went to William and Mary Law School for their special education certification program and had wonderful training there. The Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates has a training program called the SEAT training, and that's a wonderful program. So all of the advocates that are well educated are usually going to be registered through COPA, the Council of Parent Attorney Advocates. They're going to have some of that training, and that's definitely something that you'd want to ask them.
Awesome. So now our parent has done all their homework. They understand that the school may not be doing the intervention with fidelity. They've tried to work with the school. They've educated themselves as much as possible. They now feel like it's time to go hire an advocate, right? Mm-hmm. Where does a parent go find an advocate? Because there's not an advocate store, right? So where do we go find?
And the school's not going to tell you, hey, why don't you go hire an advocate or
a
lawyer?
Where do we find an advocate that local for us to contract with or to get help with?
Yes.
So, like I said, if you go to copaa.org, you'll find a list of advocates in your area. And just to tell you a little bit about how this process will work is they will call you. You will call them, and I recommend that you have a discussion with them, maybe call 2 or 3, and make sure that they are familiar with whatever, like for dyslexia, make sure they've worked on dyslexia cases. I know for dyslexia, it is very complicated. That's why I started to specialize in it, because it took so much time. I go to all the IDA conferences. I spend a lot of time keeping up with what the different companies are doing, what their programs are, how they're geared, what they're working on. So it's a lot of extra knowledge that an advocate would need to know if they were going to specifically work with a child with dyslexia, because it can get very tricky because of that average or above average IQ. They're going to have to really be well versed in dyslexia to know how to help you get it across to the school, the specific needs that they have, because they are definitely going to come back with, they're fine, they're smart, they can do it. And they're just, they're not seeing down the road what this is going to lead to, or the problems. They don't understand the problems that are going on at home with their child.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Daphne, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. You gave us a lot of great information about advocacy.
If you have any questions, Daphne has a website, daphnecorder.com, DaphneCorder.com. And we'll put a
Yes.
link on our website, empowerdyslexia.info,
Yes.
to Daphne's website if you would like to ask the advocate some more questions.
Yeah, and then feel free to leave us comments if you have more questions for Daphne or other advocates that we would come in contact with. Please let us know. We're here to help.
Awesome. Remember that you can hear us, watch us on all of our favorite platforms, Facebook Live, YouTube. You can listen to us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Alexa, all of our great, ways of
And I will say
listening.
that we have gotten up to how many Facebook? Over 600 likes on Facebook.
We have it's like 630 followers on Facebook. I mean, our last couple
We would still like more though.
Yeah, we want to keep growing,
And then on YouTube, we're making some way as
Yeah.
well. So I appreciate you guys subscribing and
support.
liking us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate your support. So that's all the time we have today, but join us next time.
See you then.